Hi. So when you're starting any algebra course, there are a few words that you have to know because they're used every day as we're discussing how to do certain things. You've probably already learned these words, but just to make sure, we're going to do a quick refresh before we get started with the course. All right, so the first word that you need to know is variable. What exactly is a variable? Well, a variable is a letter, which it's usually a letter really, which is used to represent a quantity. So for example, if I have something that looks like this, if I have something like, let's say 4x equals 12, well, right here, that x actually represents a number, and so it is a variable. My variable actually doesn't have to be a letter. We usually do use letters, whether it's English letters or Greek letters, but it can actually be a picture, but we'll use letters. If you see something like this, 5x, it is still a variable, even though there's no equal sign, there's no other number on another side, as long as that is representing something that could be a number. So in this case, the number could be different things. In this case, the number may not be different things, but it's still representing a number. So these are variables. All right, let's keep going. All right, so what is a coefficient? Well, if as we had before, we had 4x. Now, that actually represents 4 times x, but I don't have to write the 4 times x. I can just write 4x. That number that is being multiplied by my variable, so it's usually written in front of the variable, is a coefficient. So a coefficient is a number multiplied by a variable, usually written in front. So in this case, 4 is a coefficient. Let's see. Okay. So now we're going to look at what a term is. So a term, we're growing now. So we had our variable, we had our coefficient. Together, this can make a term. So for example, 4x together is a term. But you don't have to have both in order to be a term. So I could just have 4, and that could be a term in whatever I'm writing, or I could have just x, and that could be a term. Or I could have an exponent on my variable, so I could have x to the 5th, and that could be a term. So these are terms that will make up something bigger, and we'll look at what that bigger thing is in just a second. So those are terms that could be a part of something else. Okay, so an operation is where the math actually starts to happen. An operation is a mathematical process, and the most common ones that we see are addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Those are pretty common. We also have things like square root, and other things that we won't talk about right now. But what is important for us to know about an operation is that sometimes operations have an inverse. So in algebra, as we're trying to figure things out, sometimes we have to go forward and we will do an operation moving forward, and sometimes we have to go in the other direction. We have to go backwards and do the inverse operation. So it's important to know that the inverse operation of addition is subtraction, and vice versa. The inverse operation of subtraction is addition. The inverse operation of multiplication is division, and vice versa. Inverse of division is multiplication. And the inverse operation of squaring something is square rooting that same thing. So it's good to know that because that's something that we will be doing consistently throughout the course. So let's keep going. All right, so now we're building. We know what a term is, and now we can put our terms together and create a mathematical phrase. That mathematical phrase is called an expression. So for example, if I have one term here, let's say I have 4x. I'm really attached to the 4x right now. And I have another term, let's say 12. We can join those terms with an operation. Let's say we could add them, we could subtract them. So now this entire thing is a phrase, it's an expression. We can actually have a teeny tiny little expression that consists of just a number. So for example, 8 is an expression as well. Or we can have an expression that consists of just a number and a variable, or just a variable, so we can have an expression that's x. So as long as you have at least one term, it is an expression, but you can have multiple terms joined by various operations to make an expression. Something important to note, people are often asked to evaluate an expression. So for example, if you're told x is to evaluate for x minus 1, a lot of people say, oh, should I solve it? No, you should not solve it. This is not an equation, and it therefore cannot be solved. But you can evaluate it, meaning find the value of this expression. So you would then, if you are asked to evaluate it, you would take the 4, multiply it by x, which so happens to be 2 in this case, and subtract 1. So it would be 8 minus 1, which is 7, and we'll do more of that later on. Finally, we're going to look at what an equation is, and we will of course see so many equations in algebra because that is what algebra is all about. An equation is a mathematical statement with two expressions that are equal to each other. So hopefully you remember what an expression is. So let's say we have an expression over here, 4x plus 12, we have an x2, that's 4x plus 2. Let's say we have an expression over here, 10. Remember, an expression can just be one number. That's okay. If they are equal to each other, we are now looking at an equation. So it doesn't matter what the expression on the left looks like or what the expression on the right looks like. As long as they are both expressions that are equal to each other, we have an equation. Now, an equation can be solved, and we will be solving a lot of them in our course, so stay tuned.